Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidi. The time is 7 minutes past 8 Central African time, and we're excited to have you join us for the Juma edition of News and Views. It's the last one for the holy month of Ramadan, and what a crazy, crazy month of broadcasting we've had, and we're glad that you're able to stay with us through it all. And we're going to be kickstarting today's show with a look into a very, very significant policy shift. The Department of Home Affairs has essentially scrapped the controversial 5-year renewal requirement for Muslim marriage officers, a move being welcomed as a long overdue step towards equality and, most importantly, the recognition of Muslim marriages. For years, concerns were raised that the rule unfairly burdened Muslim marriage officers, placing them on an unequal footing compared to their counterparts. And now, after sustained pressure from parties like Jama-Ah in Parliament, that regulation has been brought to an end. So yeah, we're going to be having a quick conversation with the Deputy Minister of Social Development and leader of Jama-Ah, Ganief, Hendricks. And we're going to be looking at what does this change mean in practice? What does it mean for Muslim South Africans who are practicing, young couples that want to get married, and what the broader implications does it have for the recognition of Muslim marriages in South Africa? And Mr. Ganief Hendricks is joining us via a virtual platform. He's been on the line. Like working with him. It's always very, very early. Deputy Minister, welcome to News and Views. Always a pleasure having you on air. Really appreciate you giving us your time. Deputy Minister, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, and I think we'll jump right into it, Deputy Minister. I think there was a video yesterday that we saw here at the office. I'm sure a lot of South Africans saw it. Was of the Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Leon Schreiber, essentially making that announcement of the scrapping of that 5-year renewal rule for Muslim marriage officers. He seemed very, very excited. What did you make of that, and what do you make of this very, very significant announcement?
Look, that was a bit of electioneering. I don't blame the minister for, during the month of Ramadan, getting another Muslim councillor at the first mosque in South Africa to make that announcement. But as you know, the Constitutional Court ruled that the Marriage Act of South Africa is unconstitutional. It allowed it to carry on for 2 years. 2 years is expired. So South Africa does not have a Marriage Act as we speak. The Marriage Act provides for marriage officers, and Muslims have also applied to become marriage officers. So the announcement, is, I think, a big joke. When it comes to Muslim marriages, for decades, there has been attempts to have a Muslim Marriage Act on its own, standalone. And when President Zuma was presented with a policy that would lead to a Muslim marriage bill and an act, the cabinet rejected it because there were too many objections to a Muslim marriage act. Then the Constitutional Court also dealt with the matter. And the Constitutional Court was asked to instruct that a Muslim Marriage Act be instituted, and the Constitutional Court rejected that. So where we stand now is that South Africa is busy with a new Marriage Act, and all marriage acts like the one for same-sex marriages, cultural marriages, civil union marriages will all fall away. And we will have a new Marriage Act, and it will very soon be dealt with by the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs and voted for in Parliament. So that is where we stand. The Constitutional Court also said that the reason why our marriage acts are unconstitutional, and I said, I'm telling you now, we don't have a marriage act. 2 years has expired. It's nearly the fourth year now since that ruling. The Constitutional Court made a very significant judgment that a Sharia marriage is a valid South African marriage. So to deal with that, the Department of Home Affairs, the previous minister, and myself, we sat down with these officials, 9 officials, with Al Jama-Ah's 3 top illegal eagles, and we've managed to address the judgment of the Constitutional Court. And the minister had certain powers which we exercised, and he issued a circular. That circular, when it comes to Muslim marriages, provides absolutely no role for marriage officers. It provides absolutely no role for Muslim marriage officers. So the extension that you talk about, is of no significance whatsoever to any Muslim or to any young person that you refer to that wants to get married. It is guided by a circular which has been published in the government gazette, and that circular sets out the procedure in order to get a valid South African marriage certificate. And on that certificate, it indicates the type of marriage, and it states clearly that this is a Muslim marriage. So the circular also provides for a choice between in and out of community of property. And as you know, in Islam, a marriage must be out of community of property. So there's an elective process. And you are required to come with your wife and bring your IDs. And sometimes, if everything is in order, they press a button and you get a valid South African marriage certificate with an entry that says Muslim marriage. So because the Constitutional Court stated that the Sharia marriage is a valid South African marriage, the consequences of that marriage must be in terms of the Sharia and not necessarily only in terms of the Constitution, which states that when it comes to marriages, reasonable accommodation must be made. In that spirit, the Constitutional Court made that particular ruling. So all this much ado about extending 5 years for marriage officers, they don't exist. There's no Marriage Act that gives marriage officers any powers. So we're in limbo, but as a Muslim community is not in limbo. We have a circular, and we have a provision for if you have performed your nikah in a mosque by any imam, and there are 10,000 imams. And we only have 500 Muslim marriage officers. May have gone up a bit. But there are 10,000 imams that can perform a nikah, give you a nikah certificate. You take that certificate to Home Affairs, you bring your wife with, or you bring your husband with, you bring your IDs with, and you sign 1 or 2 documents, you elect out of community of property, and that is how the matter is resolved. So that is the way forward, and I cannot understand why the media hasn't done their homework, hasn't done their research, and are misleading their listeners and misleading their readers.
No, thank you so much for unpacking it in detail for our listeners, because I think it's very, very important. Al Jama has been quite vocal on this issue as a political party, and I want us to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want you to walk us through the journey of what kind of resistance or support did you encounter in getting this change implemented, and what are some of the stumbling blocks that we still have when it comes to making sure that we have a marriage act, as you've been mentioning that there isn't one in place right now. But we'll answer all of those questions after the short break.
For the first time, I can dream again.
The Africa Muslims Agency Orphan Hope Program provides the food, clothing, and basic support needed by thousands of children across the world. Every child deserves a chance at a hopeful future.
For 50,000 trans, you can transform our lives with the AMA Orphan Hope Program.
Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
With Ashraful Aid this Ramadan, your zakat changes lives. It feeds families facing hunger, restores dignity to those in need, and brings hope where it is needed most. From food relief to essential support, your zakah reaches communities with care, transparency, and impact. Give with confidence, give with trust. Make your zakah count this Ramadan. Give your zakah to Ashraful Aid and help change lives today.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. The time is 20 minutes past 8 Central African time, and we're still in conversation with the Deputy Minister of Social Development and the leader of Jama-Ah. I'm sure you've been listening before we went on that short ad break, that Jama-Ah has been quite vocal on the issue of the recognition of Muslim marriages. And now just yesterday, the Department of Home Affairs under Mr. Leon Schreiber, of the Democratic Alliance, GNU, which Jama-Ah is a very, very integral part of. They made an announcement that there was a 5-year renewal rule that's going to be implemented for Muslim marriage officers. This is to ensure equality and just removing the burden of having to renew those licenses every couple of years. 5 years it is. And we're joined, as I mentioned, by Mr. Hendricks, leader of Jama-Ah, and the Deputy Minister of Social Development. Mr. Hendricks, before we went on that short break, I wanted to chat briefly on some of the stumbling blocks that you guys, especially as Jama-Ah as a party, have had when it comes to making sure that Muslim marriages are recognized in South Africa, and also if you can walk us through some of the resistance or support, if you may, that you encountered in making sure that this change gets implemented.
Look, as you know, Jama-Ah, we developed a registration of Muslim marriages bill, which had a debate in Parliament. And this bill has the support of the whip of the Democratic Alliance. I spoke to him last week again about it. And he felt that this bill is going to address the judgment of the Constitutional Court, and is the way forward when it comes to Muslim marriages and even other marriages. So the registration of Muslim marriages is a bare bones bill, and it makes sure that a Muslim marriage, you get a valid South African certificate. They're not going to call you a foreigner later on. It is on the National Population Register, and it has all the legal consequences that you need in the event of death, in the event of custody of children, in the event of inheritance, and so on. So that particular bill is part of the new marriage bill that's being considered, because that was the agreement that myself and the previous Minister of Home Affairs and our legal representatives from both sides agreed to. So the new marriage act, when it is eventually passed, will accommodate the Al-Jama-Ah's policy and position that government shouldn't interfere in ecclesiastical matters. It must leave every religion to deal with its own disputes. So Al-Jama-Ah has another bill that we must still launch, and that is for a Sharia court, which will only deal with personal law matters. We're not going to deal with criminal matters and cut off people's hands if they steal. It's only going to deal with personal Muslim matters relating to Muslim personal law, like marriage and talaq and inheritance and nafaka and things like that. We also have an amendment
That's a
to
very,
the
very
maintenance.
interesting one, Mr. Hendricks. That's a very interesting one, and I'm sure just if we could just segue and focus on that. So you're saying you are working on or you want to propose to Parliament to have a Sharia court? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, we've done all the work. Our
How
legal
far are you?
The bill is ready to be presented. But Al-Jama-Ah has done about 5 bills. So we have to time it. We can't have all our bills at the same time. We have to also give other parties and government an opportunity to also register their bills. So the bill has been completed for a Sharia court. We largely used the models in the UK. And it requires an amendment to the Arbitration Act, which will allow for disputes arising out of a Muslim marriage to be dealt with by mediation and later on compulsory arbitration, so that we keep these matters out of our courts and that the Muslim community will deal with its own matters and not depend on any judge, to rule on Sharia. And there will be a lot of interest on other religious groups, cultural groups, to support this bill, because it means that all government does is the registration part, making sure that your death certificate says that you are married and that your spouse of that particular marriage gets the benefits that is entitled to, especially because, Muslims can marry more than one wife. So there are disputes. So if you have a marriage certificate, a valid South African marriage in your certificate, in your hands, which says type of marriage, Muslim marriage, it empowers the women. So there's 1,000 cases at the moment where Muslim women now have Muslim marriage certificates, and they are using that to ensure that they get their rights, which they are entitled to in terms of the Sharia. So inshallah, we want to, after Easter, we want to submit the bill on a Sharia court. We call it other names, because as soon as you say Sharia, then everyone's, hands go up and they talk about.
I want to touch on that. I want to touch on that in particular because I think it was a few months ago. There was a rejected registration of the Islamic State of Africa. It was called ISA. It was a political party led by Farhad Huma, who essentially said this was going to be a Sharia party, their intention is to implement Sharia law in South Africa. And, the moment you mention Sharia, people will tell you South Africa is a circular state, and everything works within the confines of that concept. How do you see this one panning out? And then what kind of arguments are you making when you propose that bill to have a Sharia court essentially being one of the recognized modes of justice in secular South Africa?
Look, we will change the name because Sharia is an ugly word amongst Westerners and America and so on, Israel. So the idea is to localize personal law matters to be dealt with by their own communities, to free up the courts. Because the Khoisan, for example, have their own set of rules when it comes to disputes on marriages and on divorces and inheritance. And most other communities as well, they don't want the courts to interfere. Very recently, the president took us into his confidence and said that the religious sector don't want government interference. Just give a basic framework. Let us look after our matters ourselves. We are best placed to do that. So I think that, the president seemed to support, as least interference in religious matters as possible. And so while he's the president, that will be the policy. And there won't be a quarrel for us to have government only look at the registration of Muslim marriages, so women can get their rights. And then as far as handling disputes is concerned, you can't have people of other faiths coming to rule on matters pertaining to Islamic marriage laws. You need 20, 30 years of experience to really understand how everything works. So not any Dick, Tom and Harry can rule on these matters. I'm not saying our judges are Dick, Tom and Harry, but you have specialist judges just for labor matters. Not any judge can do labor matters. Similarly, not any judge can deal with Sharia law marriages. And our constitution has been very bold to say that a Sharia marriage, and they use the word Sharia, the Constitutional Court put their foot into it. They actually did. They could have said Muslim marriage. They said a Sharia marriage is a valid South African marriage. Yes. So, South Africa must now get used to that. There's nothing harmful about the Sharia, and we just need to do much better to explain people, that Sharia is not the horrible thing that the West tries to make it out to be. So Jama-Ah is looking forward to presenting the bill, and we hope to have the support of many parties. There are many Muslims in other parties, and I'm sure they would want Muslims to deal with their own affairs. That means our ulama must get the house in order. We have 50 ulama bodies, each one claiming to be the leading ulama body, each claiming to be the most representative and the most acceptable. And because of that situation, that's why President Zuma didn't accept what was a very good Muslim Marriage Act because of the disputes among the ulama. So here, no one can dispute the registration that you must register your marriage. It must be on the national population register. It must be accessible. And when you die, your death certificate must say married. Now, when most Muslims die, their death certificate is never married. And children later on, pick up these documents and they think that I'm a bastard. My parents weren't married. And it creates a lot of other problems. So I'm very happy that it is possible now for Muslims to have their nikah recognized. And like I say, we have 10,000 imams who can issue a nikah certificate via their mosque, via their mosque committee. And we only have 500 or 600 Muslim marriage officers, so they don't really count. They are very insignificant.
No, most definitely. I think we're going to leave on that note, Mr. Ganief. Hendricks, always a pleasure chatting to you. The local government elections are our partners. I'm sure we'll be chatting a lot, you and I. Jazakallah so much for giving us your time, and hope we chat soon. Salam.
Yeah, we just want to say that we had our best last night to sight the moon. I was at the beachfront with 10,000 other people. We tried our best, but the clouds just didn't want to move. You know, when the cloud moves, the moon appears. But the cloud was dark and it stayed, you know, and that's why we have the pleasure of fasting another day today. But inshallah, tomorrow will be Eid Mubarak, and let me use this opportunity to wish all your listeners and viewers a happy Eid Mubarak. And my message for Eid is, now that we fasted, we must do what we can to ensure that there is zero malnutrition in South Africa. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah so much. There you go. Ganief Hendricks of Al Jama-Ah.